everybody on here, and I wanted to get this cut out for our Connecting Codes channel. I know I haven't done anything personally, but if you've been missing having some work, go ahead and look in the interviews section on this page, because I have put up quite a few interviews that have been talking about different topics like George Floyd and things that we have going on in our world. So you can definitely catch up on some things there. And hopefully my air conditioner isn't too loud in the background while I'm doing this, but I am going to be a little more scripted. I'm going to tell you this is a longer video, so I know sometimes people will like to break that up into two things, but I have a lot to cover. I started to delve into one topic and it's turned into, like, it just, the crumbs just kept going, and it's amazing what I've been able to unfold along the way. So I'm hoping you're going to find this really interesting as well. So always here on Connecting Codes, what I'm doing is I'm taking events and things that are happening in the world. I'm taking aspects of what is going on and things that we need to pay attention to in our world, and I'm looking at them from a code perspective. But then I'm also sharing the different pieces that go along with that, as far as the information and what that is about, even beyond the codes, and how that is tying into our world events. So today's topic, and what I'm going to cover today and this week, is agenda news. And agenda news is is big stuff. We hear about mainstream media, right, a lot. We hear about fake news a lot. Well, agenda news is kind of right in some of those same categories. And when we look at it, when we first start off, an agenda is an attempt, and this is by the code perspective, an agenda is an attempt to destroy success. It oftentimes will come from those who are jealous, those who are wanting attention, those who are not getting recognition, particularly as a result of someone who is let's say who is doing things from their own efforts. They're getting recognition from their own efforts, from putting the work in, from doing the work. And news has a code pattern that is supposed to be, and I say supposed to be, in its true form, is about showing successes. But in its distorted form, it will be about destruction. So think about that. When we look at how much is on the news that is about success versus destruction. So that means such a very, very minute piece of the news is actually standing in its true energy. Now, when we bring together agenda and news, and that comes together in a code pattern, what we find is lies, deception, and manipulation. Now, no surprise there, right? Absolutely no surprise that it comes out that agenda news is all about lies, deception, and manipulation. Of course, the common term we've heard a lot of times has been fake news in this. So what happens with agenda news is that they will make massive or absent news due to the agenda that they're trying to push. In other words, what they will do is they will turn something into massive news reporting. For example, the virus, right? They will make that a massive news event. And we've seen it, right? There's been all kinds of things, from documentaries and all of these other things that are going on. And they will be, you know, just giving it far more coverage and far more press than it should. Now, part of that is because the virus was tied into other agendas. We know that. We know there's a lot more to it than just basic news. But even small things, we see this with the riots, we see this with a lot of things. On the other hand, we will see events that never get any attention at all. I mean, almost no attention. And they're big stuff that's happening. They're big things that are happening, like, you know, maybe the turnover in the monarchy, you know, like the queen not being the queen anymore, things like that, which, you know, took months to come out. So I have to ask these questions. When we start talking about agenda news, would the virus be known without it? Would we really hear about it? Let's say the virus wasn't an agenda, okay? Let's say that it wasn't part of some plan along the way. Do you really think that you would have heard about it? Do you really think there would have been a shutdown? Do you really think that masks and all these other things that have happened would have been put in place? I'm pretty sure not, because they would have minimized it the same way they did with other things like AIDS and other things that happened under different presidents along the way. And would we have had the riots and continued terrorism without it? I mean, I've been through riots before in my life. Jesse did, my human self has. And, you know, really when you get down to it, a lot of times these riots will fizzle out after a couple of days. But when the mainstream media and the press and the news is giving it all of this attention and all of this glory and all of this stuff, they're keeping it locked in and going. And this is another reason. If they're going to continue to report on things, it's surefire that this isn't world news. I mean, first of all, not only is it about destroying success, but it is about keeping something going. It's about keeping people separated, divided, conquered, all these things. And I'm going to get into that because these are important pieces. Now, when we look at agenda news, there's three really big components to this, and that is hijacking. Hijacking, hypocrisy, and then we have creating conflict and division. So those three key components. When we look at what hijack or hijacking is about, then this is an important thing, because to hijack something is to create chaos. It's a deliberate attempt to bring damage and destruction to something. And that something is usually something that starts off good. It may start off very divine, very pure, and it oftentimes will come in and work under the pretense of that. So, for example, we saw that with the riots, right? Where the peaceful protest got hijacked by non-peaceful and terrorist action. So, you know, the hijacking becomes a big piece in it. So hijacking can happen under a lot of different forms, right? It can be taking a story and then changing the information on it to make it stimulate chaos, to stimulate arguments among people. It can take something that was in a good event and a good policy or a good step that was taken and turn it into something that is really just creates all of a sudden issues and brings up different topics and makes it into something that isn't. So, you know, these peaceful protests over one thing all of a sudden become a race issue or things like that. So hijacking happens under a lot of different forms, and I'm going to get into more deeper aspects of that where it connects with savage behavior and how that ties in. So really we want to think about that with hijacking. Hijacking is used by all of the deep state players. They have always hijacked something, be it a symbol, a belief, a religious party, numbers, phrases, charities and organizations and groups, and they use this a lot in the media as they twist and they turn things around. So the infinity symbol was something that was hijacked in its original form, and they wiped it out. They wiped it out through all of our history. I can't even find most of the original aspects of the infinity. The original infinity was vertical. It looked like a figure 8, but they turned it horizontal, and everybody accepts the horizontal 8, which is really about materialism, as the sign of infinity. So they hijack these things all the time. They hijack number patterns. They hijack terms and words to use, like global, worldly, things like this, that actually could, in its true form, have some very positive connotations, but they've hijacked it for these other agendas. So they use these things to get to people. Hijacking is used as a means to cloak bigger agendas of chaos in them. Hypocrisy in codes is very interesting, because in codes it's all about destroying spirit. It is all about destroying the human aspects of hope and faith and believing in God and God energy and spiritual, true spiritual, pure divine essence in the world. So hypocrisy is very interesting, and it is used as a way to create hierarchies and to demoralize and diminish those that do not play with the agendas. We can have terrorists all over the place and mock the African cultures, destroy monuments, etc. However, you cannot have a political rally or gather in peaceful protesting in groups that are a fraction of the size of our riots. And if you so much as mention black, you are a racist. So you see the hypocrisy? Hypocrisy is saying, I get to do something that you don't get to do. That's a hierarchy structure. I have privileges that you don't have. So when these people are saying that you can't have a rally or you can't do a peaceful protest of 30 people, but you can go out and be in these massive riots, that is hypocrisy. That is an aspect that is destroying spirit. That is an aspect of saying, I'm better than you, I have privilege than you, and I will do what I want. Okay? Now, creating conflict and division. And when we look at conflict, what that is about, conflict is meant to make people stupid. That flat out, that's what it's about. It's making people not remember their history. It's about destroying history so that they can't learn from it. Oh, gee, where have we seen that lately with monuments being destroyed, huh? I think that that's been pretty evident lately. It's all about keeping people from laying down the foundations that create success and that create a favorable future. So it's all about disrupting and tearing down opportunities for a favorable future. Division in the aspects of codes is about competition. It is about contradiction. So division is literally the tool of separation. I mean, it's literally this aspect of, we're going to tear you apart. We're going to create conflict not only between you as people, but we're going to create that conflict in your mind. And when conflict is created in the mind fragments and it loses its train of thoughts, and it starts to actually set in dimensions of Alzheimer's, dementia, things like that, because there's a division and there's a separation that's happening within the brain itself. So this is a really, it's a big piece to think about when we think of how powerful these pieces are and how they're being used. Conflict and division is just as it seems. With the hijacking and hypocrisy in place, everyone can be kept arguing and distracted while we try to pull more and more things over on them. If the people are kept in conflict and division, they will be too busy arguing with themselves to ever come after those that are creating all of that. So now let's take a look at this. This is big pieces. So behind this, we have Soros. We know that Soros stands behind the false flags, the fake media, or agenda news. And I talked about this in a recent interview on Paranormal Now, which you can find in my paranormal section. And we looked at some of this in relation to the George Floyd aspect. But Soros is the puppeteer. Okay, he's like one of the big top puppeteers. Right up there, like kind of Gates is a big puppeteer too, but that's part of why they've been kind of connecting up. He coordinates and works with many different groups, organizations, and others with communist, globalist, and Marxist agendas. Flat out there. He worked for a Nazi regime. He funds the shadow government. He's connected to the American Communist Party. Bet you didn't even know that we had the American Communist Party, which is all hooked up in the shadow government. The use of their foundations and organizations. Think about all these presidents prior to Trump who set up all these foundations and organizations. Obama did it, Clinton did it, tons of them did it. They're all tied in with this to be a front. And those organizations that appear to be so philanthropic and great at heart are just a front for these bigger pieces. And it's a way to move the fund through to different places, to give money to different things. So when they come in and take over something like they did with Black Lives Matter, it's just one more piece to move the funds around, because it all goes through a different payment system, which tells you you can have that money sent to other things if a certain organization doesn't claim it. Well, if that organization doesn't claim it because they're ruled by an organization that wants the money for something else, what do you think is going to happen there? The original organization is never going to get it, and it's never going to go to the original purpose. So this is why there was a big aspect of bringing forward all of a sudden all these nonprofit organizations, okay, coming through. Now, one of the biggest places that we see conflict and division is through the political parties. And this hijacking has been going on long before the founding of America. A great reminder that the battles of today that are being played out in the political realms are battles that have been happening in our world throughout much of the human existence. So if Soros and the communist, globalist, Marxist are all terrified of Trump, okay, all these ones are terrified of Trump and spending so much energy in trying to defeat him, it becomes quite clear that Trump is a huge threat to them. He is the person that has the ability to bring them down, and they are terrified of losing their control and being exposed. The battle we are in is a spiritual battle, and it is a battle that is about rights, freedom, being able to have some choice. It is about living as a sovereign human being. And this does not sit well with those that seek full and total control and want to remove all the aspects of being able to think for yourself, to come and go, to do the things you love, and many other sinister things. Humans become nothing more than a piece of property in this model. And Trump is standing in the way of them taking total control, and they don't like it. And they will stop at nothing to try to get to us. He is foiling all their plans, all of their agendas, and he's going to continue to do so. And while people like to dredge up words said by Trump in his early and young years of his life, I think we can all agree we have said some things and done some things. I know my human self has, we all have, in our youth, that were not the best. So if we are to have this loving world, right, loving world, a compassionate world, a world that embraces different cultures and beliefs in their purest sense, then we must also stand up for saying no to these destructive models. Now, this is why the media is so important, because it is through them that so many base their decisions and they get their information, and when it is corrupt, people get nothing more than the agenda that Soros wants you to accept. We must realize that it is used through most everything from movies, toys, news, and every product that we purchase. So we must realize that 99% of the time we are being played by the media to create reactions and division. Look at the weather. Let's take that as an example. That is mundane, okay? Because it is noted but not given a ton of time to. Any real news, true news, would be reported in the same manner. Factual, without swaying public opinion. Even at times, though, there will be rumblings of global warming, which has already proven, by the way, to be a hoax. If you've done your research on that, you know that that's not true. And, you know, that's a big take that a lot of people got swallowed into. So like the weather, there are these cycles that the tactics are used in. And the totality of those cycles in both the macrocosm and the microcosm aspects can come to be known as psychological operations, also known as Psy-Ops. Now, psychological operations has been used by the military for a very long time, and it was used as a way to bring a positive image to the United States. It was used as a way. Now, do I totally agree with this even in that sense? I don't totally, because it involves manipulation in it, but it is one of those aspects of going in and making sure, for example, people see the truth. Now, that is in the true essence of it, of how it was originally intended. And there's huge things on this, and I've got a bunch of links that I'm putting in at the end so that you can go in and check some of these resources out for yourself and read the more full and complete story on them, because there's way too much information for me to cover in a video or in here, or even to get into citing too much. So you can knock your little heart out from the link that I put in there that tells you all of the details about the military psychological operations. Okay, so in its original form, it was meant to bring together positive success, but it did it in a rebel way. And so even in its good form, so to say, its good form, right, it has some challenges to it. Now, in the aspect of Psy-Ops, if we look at the codes from that aspect, Psy-Ops, which is oftentimes the abbreviated version, and what the media uses, what George Soros is using in these events and these false flags and things like that. The Psy-Ops are literally about creating destruction, misusing one's power for materialistic means in order to create division, to supply one's own pockets, one's own greed in some way, and to put others at a point of poverty, of having to endure hardships in the physical aspects, of breaking their spirits, of trying to make them believe there isn't a God or a divine force in the world, which is an absolute lie, to say the least. So that's kind of the code version of these. Now, these operations include 4 main components to them, and they are the foundations and come from the foundations of Marxism. Hello. Hello, did we not say there were already ties between Soros and Nazis, because he already worked under these Marxism, communist, globalism approaches. So the agenda news follows all of these components. These components are as follows: demoralization, destabilization, crisis, and normalization. Okay? Really 4 big points that they use in this. So when we look at the codes of this, demoralization has its codes in turbulence. It is about creating an unfavorable future. When we talk about that, that's an unfavorable future for the masses. In this case, when we look at it in this aspect, it is an unfavorable future that will benefit nobody in it. And it's done through force, through rebellion, through conflict, through making people believe they're standing up for their rights, all kinds of things like that. Destabilization. Destabilization in codes is where the spirit is destroyed. It is where hope is destroyed. It is where God is destroyed. It's an aspect of destroying God when we look at it from the code perspective. Crisis from the code perspective is about destruction. It is about upheaval. It is about trauma. It is about creating drama and trauma. So drama and trauma go hand in hand here. Normalization. Oh boy, how many times during the virus have we heard, we just got to get back to normal. When we get back to normal, right? The new normal. And no thanks. No thanks. When we're talking about these realms, I want a new compassionate world. I don't want new normal anything. So normalization is the point of this whole process in the realm of codes, which is about removing freedom. This is where freedom is removed. This is where independence is removed. This is an aspect that will have an impact on all existences. It is impacting all timelines. So the destruction that happens, the shift from freedom to slavery aspects the regaining of control in these aspects comes back to pieces of just, yeah, it comes back to, it affects all of the timelines. It affects all of the timelines, and it's all about removing the freedom. It's all about regaining control in it. Now, when we put these four components together and they play out all together, what we have is we have the destruction of abundance energy. Now, why that is so important is because abundance energy, and excuse me, my nose is itching here, abundance energy is about knowing our true self. It is the abundance energy that is connected to the God energy that we all possess and carry. And it is in knowing our abundance that we cannot be controlled. So if you destroy the abundance energy of people, of earth, of life, because all of life is interconnected, right? So if you destroy abundance energy in one form of life, like humans, you destroy it in animals, you destroy it in trees, you destroy it all the way across the board and things, right? So let's look at some definition kind of aspects to these four components. Okay, demoralization is the aspect of creating trauma. It is an attempt to make those who could rebel against compliance subservient, aka slavery to the masses. We see this today where there are false flags, masks, George Floyd's death, and other hoaxes that are out there, okay? On a macrocosm, this cycle began basically around when JFK was assassinated, okay? That's one cycle. So we have big old cycles and we have smaller cycles of it. So the smaller cycles will play out in an event like the protests and the riots and George Floyd's death. The bigger, fuller patterns of it will play out over long periods of time. So it could take, for example, this stage may have played, would play out for 10, 20, 30 years at a time for the bigger pieces of it, just to give you an idea. So one of these aspects of demoralizations, one of these bigger cycles started when JFK was assassinated. So on a microcosm, it began with the virus. Maths are well known, by the way, as a way to demoralize and create trauma for people. It's subtle in lowering the oxygen levels. So when you're holding it like this, and there's studies out there, they show it. There's a video on YouTube, I don't know how long it'll be up, but it actually shows where they measure it and it drops below proper oxygen levels, and so then you're breathing in carbon dioxide. Yay! Isn't that good and healthy for you, right? So actually, even if we think we're doing something good, and this is where they come into these agendas, right? You think you're doing something good by putting a mask on and saving the lives of others because of all the media they pumped your way, right? All of the agenda news that has been pumped your way has convinced you of this. And you're creating trauma without even knowing it. So what they've done is they've convinced you to do this. They've taken the agenda news has told you this is the right thing to do, this is what you got to do, this is how you're going to save lives, blah, 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 blah. And in the meantime, they've got you creating trauma to your human self in the process, and you don't even know it's being created. Boom. There you go. Cue people. Boom. Destabilization. It's the aspect of mind control and fear. Okay? This shows up in aspects of oftentimes making people feel guilty for their choices. So this is a big one. This is huge right now, right? Confinement, shutting things down have been a big part of this with the virus. And racism is another way of creating this. How many posts out there have you said you should feel guilty? Look at what the Antifa people were doing. You need to get on your knees and bow. You need to lay on the ground and be guilty. You need to feel guilty. Where is this coming from? Marxism. It's coming from these Marxism steps. This is part of destabilization. So if you're wondering why Trump's throwing a big fit about this, this is why, okay? Because it's about destabilization. It has nothing to do with the race factors in it, okay? The more divided that people become and the more emotionally charged they are behind that division, the greater the destabilization. So we're seeing this play out on a worldwide event. This isn't about one country, this is worldwide. These riots are happening worldwide. The shutdowns happened worldwide, okay? Masks were also carried over into this aspect, as those wearing masks were taught to fear those without masks, and those without them were taught to fear those with masks, right? Because there's been all these things, and people have played it out. People have been attacked because they weren't wearing a mask. They've been proven because they bought this programming, okay? Oftentimes, we will see aspects of racism, immigration, food shortages, that's a whole nother topic for another day, scarcity, poverty, terrorism, which includes the riots, all used to create this. And these are, as I mentioned in my interview on Paranormal Now, these are all hot pieces that Soros uses when he puts his agendas into play. So these are all big things. Why? Because they're sensitive places, they've got a history behind them, they've got a whole dynamic of aspects there that are going to get people fired up. And of course, as we know, they love having us in fear. They love having us in these anger and things like that, because what is running through the blood system is actually an energetic feed for them. It's, you know, yes, there are literal blood pieces that they get from that when they're actually doing that work. And for those that don't know that, I'm sorry if I just blew the cover on that, but they do in those aspects. But they also feed off of it energetically. So even without a physical doing it, they feed off of it energetically. So this is a big thing for us to keep in mind. So one of the next ones that I expect to see coming out in regards to destabilization, okay, will be connected to the alien hoaxes. And, you know, in the codes, it kind of showed this alien disclosure might be coming out this summer. So we're right on top of that, like within the next couple of months here. And there's already things that I need to do some more exploring on, but it brings up aspects of new technology of where one of the big hoaxes is going to be about an alien invasion. And a lot of people think that that might be really cool, but it's not. And they're going to massively use the media in this, massively. Talk about agenda media. This is going to be a big one that they're going to use it in, okay? And maybe in talking about it, we can just mantle some of it and it won't be what it's anticipated to be at this point. But that will be one of the next ones that could come at most any time. Some of these alien connected things, like I said, are legitimate, and many of them, however, are going to be nothing more, by the way, than an advanced 3D version of holographic technology. So this means they can make you see something that isn't really there. And they don't even have to be anywhere around. You won't see any cameras around. They can use this and implement this through, guess what? 5G technology. What do you know? And that's pretty much needed for them to do it. So bravo to those countries who have been able to temporarily put a stop on their 5G technology, because that is the technology. You wonder why they are out there putting all those little grids up in space for the 5G technology? This is part of it right there, okay? Crisis. Crisis is focused on creating so much anxiety that control is lost, and desires to show that there is no more control and thus no more safety. It's starting to feel like what we have seen with, the peaceful protest hijacked by terrorist groups. And this aspect is all about gaining control. Okay, the crisis piece is all about gaining control for the deep state, for people like Soros. It is part of the problem reaction solution model. And they like to use that, And this is the reaction stage, while the first two are the problem stage, and all of this is followed with the solution, which is known as normalization. Okay, now I have a little piece here to read about Psy-Ops, which actually comes off of one of the military sites. It's fas.org is the site. I've got a link on that. Psy-Ops are planned operations that convey selected information and indicators to foreign target audiences, so TAs is what they refer to those as, to influence their emotions, motives, objective reasoning, and ultimately the behavior of foreign governments, organizations, groups, and individuals. The purpose of all Psy-Op is to create in neutral, friendly, or hostile foreign groups the emotions, attitudes, or desired behavior that support the achievement of U.S. national objectives and the military mission. In doing so, Psy-Op is influenced not only policy and decisions, but also the ability to govern, the ability to command, the will to fight, the will to obey, and the will to support. The combination of Psy-Op products and actions create in the selected TAs as a behavior that supports U.S. national policy objectives and the theater commander's intentions at the strategic, operational, and tactical levels. The nature of Psy-Op is varied and ever-changing. Psy-Op personnel must support a broad range of missions and force structures in environments ranging from austere to highly sophisticated. Psy-Op are planned, coordinated, and executed before, during, and after conflicts, and must be integrated at all echelons to achieve its full force multiplier potential. So, proven in combat and peacetime, Psy-Op are one of the oldest weapons in the arsenal of man, as well as an important force protector, combat multiplier, and non-lethal weapon systems. So, you can see where this being used, as I mentioned before, in a beneficial way to help knock out propaganda can be beneficial. However, when it falls into the hands of somebody like Soros and they combine it with these different components, as we've talked about, and they combine that with a Marxist regime, it gets really dangerous, and then you end up with agenda news. You end up with the things that we are seeing happening in our world right here and now. So in order to break the agenda, we have to break the cycles, and we have to stop playing into the games, the hoaxes, the agendas. Okay, we can break the cycle at any point, and the earlier we break the cycle, the less damage it can do. So this is one reason why I like to blow the cover on things before it hits the media or it comes out. And this is why many anons and whistleblowers and others do the same, because by blowing the cover before it ever comes out or it ever gets started, many operations have been cut off from happening. And this is part of different things that Trump tries to do with a lot of things. He tries to cut them off as early as possible. He tries to cut them off before they can get too out of hand. So I needed to give you all of this background so that you would be able to see another major piece of this, and that is the aspect of World War III. And by the way, in case you don't know, we are already in it here and now today. So this is really big stuff. And what I'm about to share with you came as part of a plan that was set forth by Albert Pike, who was a 33rd degree Mason. So remember, some aspects of Masons are not necessarily Illuminati associated, but most of them are. There's a lot that are. And I know this because of my human self's family background and the associations, and having a grandfather that was 13th level Mason, which was horrible, and that's part of what I talk about. So I know how nasty and how ugly, and I've had firsthand experiences through my human self of how nasty some of this gets in this area. So I just want to put that out there. I do have some people that are associated that I know of that are not into the dark aspects of it. They're into the humanitarian aspects of it. But this is, again, it's part of the hijacking. You hijack something that's good, you turn it and take it over for something not good in there. So, you know, again, people associate the number 33. It's gotten a bad rap because the Masons use it, because it's an important aspect of, for example, a message being sent from a 33rd degree Mason out to people. So when you start seeing those things pop up and you see the Anons talk about the connections and seeing that, that's a lot of where it's coming from. But just like anything else, 33 is not a bad number in and of itself. And we have to be paying attention that we're not just taking these numbers and symbols and things and then distorting them into something that they're really not and making it all bad, because every time it shows up doesn't make it bad. We have to look at what it's showing up with and what it's connected to understand the real meaning behind it. So the Third World War must be fomented, and this is taken directly from Albert Pike and his layout for the Third World War. It must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agentur of the Illuminati between the political Zionist and the leaders of the Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam, the Muslim Arabic world, and political Zionism, the state of Israel, mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economical exhaustion. Seeing pieces of that, right? How did they try to knock out the whole economy in the virus? We shall unleash the nihilist and the atheist, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and the most bloody turmoil. Then, everywhere, the citizens, obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries, will exterminate those destroyers of the civilization and the multitude, disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will from that moment be without compass or direction, anxious for an ideal, but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out in the public view. This manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. Hello? Take a look. You're still thinking it about politics? It's not about politics. It's not about political parties. It's not about Democrats versus Republicans. It's about something way, way bigger that we need to be standing up for. Okay, so they are hoping to annihilate all good and the true divine God in this process. And for those that are not familiar with nihilist, I'll give you this definition. The doctrine that nothing actually exists or that existence or values are meaningless. Relentless negativity or cynicism suggesting an absence of values or beliefs. Political belief or action that advocates or commits commits violence or terrorism, without discernible constructive goals. Also nihilism, a diffuse revolutionary movement of mid-19th century Russia that scorned authority and tradition and believed in reason, materialism, and radical change in society and government through terrorism and assassination. Was this not used with Kennedy? Was this not used with President Trump has had assassinations made on him already? Not that they made the news, right? Because they didn't want to blow that one out. A delusion experienced in some mental disorders that the world or one's mind, body, or self does not exist. They want you to think and realize and see that you do not exist, that there is no God. They want you to see all of this. So social catechism is another term that's used. Any violent upheaval, especially one of a social or political nature, a sudden and violent physical action producing changes in the Earth's surface, That's what they're calling global warming, but it's not global warming. It's part of the Earth's natural cycles and things like that. But it's the sudden and violent actions on the Earth, our arguing, our separation, that is making the changes in the Earth's surface. Okay, an extensive flood or deluge. So a few more points on the Third World War, and I have links on these things. Okay, and these are put out there. This comes from another site that I came from. The prelude, the events leading up to the start of the World War III included 9/11, 2001. Okay, the Twin Towers being taken down. Act 1, he's broken this out like a script, right, or a play. Okay, the Middle East, widespread conflict to bring the entire religion into the flames of war, possibly triggered by an Iran or militants in Pakistan using North Korean supplied nuclear arms. The first scene in this act is the U.S. invasion of Iraq on March 20th, 2003. Israel at war against her Arab neighbors, possibly Palestine. A Palestine state will be established so that all Israelis will be fully separated from Palestinians. Listen out for mention of a 7-year treaty to be confirmed by world leader, probably Bush, well, I don't know, this goes a ways back, only for Israel to viciously attack Palestine shortly thereafter. We've seen a lot of this arguments going on in there. Okay, Far East is the next one. Hair-raising nuclear confrontation that threatens mankind's existence. We've seen this. Peter Lemessier, author of the Armageddon script, page 223, written in 1981, includes China invading Taiwan and a nuclear eruption on the Korean Peninsula. Well, we're seeing things again, right? We're seeing China's takeover. We're seeing the threat of nuclear arms over there going on even in these days right now. Act 4, erosion of confidence in the system. Okay, that's a big piece where we're at right now. We are way into this scene here. So severe, citizens will be panicked into giving up their liberties and constitutional form of government. The plan calls for the dissolution of the U.S. Constitution, triggered by a significant enough terrorist attack. The ultimate intent is to introduce a global government and one world religion. This is what we are in right now. They have been working on destroying the Constitution. Again, I come back to, you want to see why these are big points for Trump? This is why. Because he knows this plan. He knows what's happening. And this is what he is working to defeat the plan. Okay? Next act, the collapse of the U.S., right? And other Western economies and morals. This is why the virus, this is why we're hearing they're going to have second and third waves, because they're trying to totally collapse the economy. And this is why Trump has come back and said, we are not shutting down. We're not shutting it all down again. So Act 6, significant population reduction. Oh boy, doesn't that sound like Gates coming into play? Using natural and man-made disasters. Hello? We're all in the middle of this. We're right at the end of this. And who can tell how this is going to end? So both biblical prophecy and the Illuminati plan state that Israel is the key. The Third World War is planned to begin when Israel goes to war against her Arab enemies. Then and only then will all other elements begin to occur, and they will do so in rapid succession. The plan is to have one disaster following another in such rapid succession that before people can mentally and emotionally handle one disastrous news event, they will be hit with another. That is happening now. COVID, riots, Black Lives Matter. It's all happening now. It is also accurate to say that until all of the elements for World War III are in place, the plan will not commence. That means they've had this in place for a long, long time. They've been working on this for a very long time, right? Demoralization, since JFK maybe? Or before. While it would be naive to suggest a specific timeline for the events leading up to and including World War III, we do know that the plans for World War III are well advanced, and our leaders involved in the secret plan are waiting only for the right signal before all-out war begins. We are in the last stages of the preparation to so globalize the world that the Masonic New Age Christ, otherwise known as the Antichrist, can appear to receive all the political and economic power of the world's rulers. This is the Illuminati plan and biblical prophecy in Revelation 17:12 through 17. Okay, so in the words of Peter Lemessurier, and I hope I'm pronouncing that okay, author again of the Armageddon script, their script is now written, subject only to last-minute editing and stage directions. The stage itself, albeit in darkness, is almost ready. Down in the pit, the subterranean orchestra is already tuning up. The last-minute walk-on parts are even now being filled. Most of the main actors, one suspects, have already taken up their roles. Soon it will be time for them to come on stage, ready for the curtain to rise. The time for action will have come. It is important that we do not get lost in this doom and gloom. And I bring this up because it's so easy to just say, that's it, there's nothing we can do. Well, look at this. This is why Trump is here. Why do you think he's turning these people over? Why do you think he's making so many changes? Why do you think he keeps some people close to them so he has a first-hand contact with where they're at with things? And then what does he do? He takes them and he exposes them. And why does this take time? Why does he have to do this? Because people will not listen if you just tell them something. You have to show them what's happening. You have to say, look, why is it only the democratic cities that these big riots are breaking out in? Why is it only in these areas? Why is it only where the mayors are not doing anything? Why is it this? Why, when you start asking these questions, the pieces come together. So you have to ask those questions. You have to follow up on those answers, because that is showing you. And it is through experience. Experience is where we get the greatest wisdom and knowledge. It's where we are bringing the greatest pieces together. So he's been working on dismantling this so that the end stage, the end game, you've saw that out there on a couple of celebrity posts, okay, does not get played out. It doesn't happen by their plan, okay? So it's important we don't get lost in the doom and gloom of this. This is why we've needed him to come into office. He's a wartime president. He understands the innate and the hidden aspects and is fully aware of the whole playbook. He's here to interrupt the players, no matter where they are in the world, right? And this is why he's pulled back from China. This is why he's pulled out of WHO. Again, we're seeing this. This includes everything from getting CEOs to step down, defunding corrupt organizations like WHO, walking the Queen out of the palace since she can't legally rule anymore. Notice how the media is absent on so much of this. Notice how nothing is being said about them. Okay? Now, in the Masonry information that is it's now blocked regarding social cataclysm, it included 3 things, and I mentioned this before, right? Absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and the most bloody turmoil. So, and I'm sorry, my nose is just itching like crazy today. So, which absolute atheism is the total denial of God's existence, right? Which we know they have to bring this out in this plan to get everybody to deny God in there. The origin of savagery shall become known. And these are the people that are known as peaceful pilgrims. Okay, these are the people, peaceful programs were like an ending. They were an even bigger macrocosm piece of this whole thing set forth back when people came to America. And the peaceful pilgrims hijacked those who were seeking freedom. So remember, the so-called peaceful pilgrims that founded our country. Okay, let's keep in mind that there were different groups that came in. Some truly peaceful and some not. Okay, people were flayed alive at that time, which is a horrible aspect that is used in satanic style sacrifices. Okay, the origins of this go on back into the 1700 range. Okay, probably even, well, actually the origins of that practice goes on much longer than that, but the origins of savagery, for example, with our country and with this particular aspect, 1700 range. So you see, they hijacked the exploration and mission to create a free world. The intent was to come over, be peaceful with the Indians, and have this free world. Well, that got hijacked by the so-called bad guys, if you want to call them that, these peaceful pilgrims, which were not that at all, and they were not part of the original aspect of creating a free world. Okay, this also begins to show you why they so badly want control over America, because with it they control the rest of the world. Okay, we have a modern day version of this that the media doesn't talk about, and it's connected to Marina Abramovich. Okay, Gates tried to use her in a commercial, and people just backlashed on it to no end, who, by the way, runs spirit cooking. Spirit cooking is a modern day aspect of flaying people. Flaying being Flaying, which is skinning them alive and disemboweling and things like that. It's really not a pretty picture, to say the least. So the reference of savagery most likely connects to showing the Masonic version of showing Lucifer's role from the start of man. It starts with Trump exposing them through the anarchists, through the arrests, through exposing who they are, the indictments, and so on. So Trump is exposing a lot of this stuff. And in that exposure, and this is why exposure becomes so important, because in the exposure, we start to put an end to these things. Okay? However, a few have tried along the way, such as Abraham Lincoln, JFK. Yep, they were doing really good until, oh, somebody came along and assassinated them and, you know, put another little agenda into place to shut them up. Okay? Most bloody turmoil. This is done through wars, riots, anarchy, assassinations, and violent protests. Starting to sound like our world today yet? It is alleged that this all comes about in order to create failure in establishing a new world that was based on freedom and as retaliation for leaving the slavery system. So when the original people were coming over looking to start that free world, they were looking to get out of all those taxes, all of that slavery system, which applied to everybody. Okay, it applied to everybody. And this is also why we are experiencing what we are today, right? What better way to bring up the slavery stuff? Gee, how appropriate that that is the one that's coming up today. Because Trump is trying to lead people to have and to keep the United States a free country, okay? We need to remember that if we are not a free country, the rest of our concerns regarding environment, human rights, equality, and so on cannot happen. If you didn't see my video on why the economy is so important, you will find it listed in my videos here on Connecting Codes. Does Operation Choke Point make Obama a psychopath? I talked about the importance of the economy in that. So while I won't get into additional things happening at this time, we will still want to watch out for what has become known as Agenda 2025, 2030, which has already been set in motion, or the groundwork is being laid for it. It is another example of selling people into a world that will be eco-friendly and will end poverty, and this is a lie. It's an absolute lie, and it's being said in order to put people in controlled, bubbled cities loaded up with 5G networks where you are completely and fully controlled. Everything begins to fully be controlled for you, and this is an adjusted version of Agenda 21 on steroids. Okay? At first glance, what's going to happen is this is going to appear to solve the world's problems, which is exactly what they want you to believe. It's exactly how they're going to present it. Look at all the problems we're going to solve in the world by doing this. And there will be no resistance to it because they're figuring if we present it this way, you won't resist it. And we'll use all of the environmentalists out there. We'll use all those peace-loving hippies and people out there to bring this on board. And that's probably one of the big things, another one of the big riots or protests that we'll see will be involving things that are part of this or connected to it in one way or another. So what they do not mention is that in buying into this plan, you will also have to buy into their solutions. Okay, so this is like Gates saying how vaccines is going to solve disease, but doesn't tell you all of the nasty layers inside of vaccines, like microchips, not giving you a choice about them, ingredients that are too disgusting to mention, things like that. And I'm going to have to save a lot of this for another topic and maybe even do an interview on it over the next few months. I've talked about that. We might be bringing out an interview on Agenda 2030 in the next couple of months here, so watch for that. There are way too many details to get into this now. So I will tell you that they are planning on using NASA as part of this. Ever wondered why Vice President Pence is now heavily working with NASA? Maybe that's a little clue there, you think? Another one of the active little pieces at play is that of defund the police. Oh boy, haven't we heard a lot about that lately, right? Yep, mainstream media has been all over this, putting it in your face, even got Antifa, BLM, and others involved in this. And is it really any question that it is the far left Democratic states that are trying to put this through and scrambling to put any piece of it in place? They are fooling the public by saying, we don't need the police for most things. Wow, talk about a list of layers in that. Again, another topic for another day. I'll have to, wait, I can't get too in depth, but let me give you just a little piece of what and who is connected to that, because I think you're going to find that interesting. So it seems that an anti-deportation group, and I've got links again on this information where I got it from. So it seems that an anti-deportation group has been affiliated with Soros' Open Society Foundation. The following comes from an article on Breitbart. The Soros-affiliated group has been part of the Defund the Police movement as far back as early 2016, long before the death of George Floyd, and that brought it to national attention. While many Americans see the current protests and riots as organic reactions to the death of Floyd, many organized groups are seizing on the momentum. The Soros-affiliated group is called Organized Communities Against Deportation, also known as OCAD, OCAD. OCAD lists on their website the Open Society Foundation as a partner. On February 16, 2016, OCAD hosted a protest in Chicago, Illinois, to defund the police, according to an article posted on the website of hashtag Not One More, another anti-deportation organization, itself an offshoot of the larger and more organized anti-deportation group, National Day Labor Organizing Network. So, as you can see, this is not a new thing. And so interesting that this happened in an election year, trying to get it passed while Obama was still in office. If you have had any piece of the news shown to you with both riots and the virus, you know the heavy dictator rule that sits there in Chicago, that sits there in Illinois. So during that protest, activists sat on ladders in the middle of a street in front of a regional immigration and customs enforcement field office, so an ICE office, holding banners that said, "Dismantle ICE, defund the police." The activists consider ICE the largest police force in the country and were joined by leaders from the movement for Black Lives who say there is a connection between their efforts, so the article said. Other activist groups participating in the protest were Assata's Daughters, Black Youth Project 100, Fearless Leading by the Youth, Palestinian Youth in Action, Centro Autonomo People's Response Team, and the Chicago Religious Leadership Network. Assata's Daughters said that in a statement, at the time, undocumented people in Chicago and nationally are living in fear daily, being taken from their homes and away from their families. We as Black American community organizers can relate to that fear. Our struggles are distinct but connected. When enforcement is overfunded, that is money that is not being spent on services that actually keep us safe. So note, let's take a look here. Undocumented, aka those that are here illegally, okay? And this police that they're so stressed about, it's not your city police, your department police, it is ICE, immigration. It's not about your local police department. So this brings up a whole other massive piece, which again, we kind of have to discuss, because this gets into voter fraud and ballot harvesting and all of those things, which we know is an agenda being pushed through right now. It has nothing to do with the police being bad or overfunded, and this is people that are in our country illegally. This is not about them being unsafe or being in danger. This is about the possibility of them being deported, okay? Now, an OCAD organizer and policy director for the hashtag Not One More campaign, Tanya Unzueta, and complained that Chicago spent 40% of its budget on police, and that the government should spend money on developing and nurturing our communities and not deporting and incarcerating them. So, yeah, I think this is, again, where they try to pull people in, right? The pulling in like, oh, we should nurture our communities. Well, Trump has been doing tons of that. He has been doing tons of things for education, for communities that have not had a lot to work with. He's putting so much in motion for that. But, here it is in Soros organization. This is the game that they're playing here, okay? And, oh, don't deport us and don't incarcerate us. But you know what? If you're here legally, you have no reason to worry. If you're here legally and doing what any other citizen would do, there's not a problem, and there's plenty of help for you legally, okay? So, it's not what it appears to be. So it goes on to say, if these agencies have endless resources, they will find endless ways to target and harm our families. They need to be defunded and dismantled. So again, why do the Democrats want this? Because they're trying to create voter fraud. So this is another reason why this is coming up right now. Okay, OCAD in recent days and weeks has been calling for its supporters to support the Black Lives Matter movement, posting on its Facebook page, "Our liberation is dependent of Black liberation." Okay, wow. And these are the people, they don't even care about Black lives. They don't care about Black people. And they're just using them and manipulating them. If you are a follower of other Anons, you are likely already aware and know where those donations are going to. So right into funding the Democratic Party. And Biden was one of the top on the list, outside of, I don't know, some other big two really big organizations out there. And right under Biden was Elizabeth Warren. So this is just my personal opinion. A lot of other Anons don't agree with me out there. A lot of other people out there have a different thing that they're bringing up, and I don't know. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but my personal opinion is follow the money. And I think that as much as everybody is saying Biden's going to pick a Black female for a VP, I think it could be Warren. I really think there's a possibility it could be Warren. And this is because I'm following the money. When I look at where all the funds for the Black Lives Matter donations are going to, and she's right under Biden for that funding, hello? Right there, that's got to tell you who they are funding. Who is Soros supporting? Who is he funding? And they've all gotten behind Biden, right? Soros wants Biden in there. And this is why Warren so graciously stepped out. So I would like to end this on a bit of a positive note as to our agenda media topic. And just recently, Michael Pack took over as the new chief of U.S.-funded global media. And it seems that he went on a big firing spree. And this has all of major mainstream media networks in a big old uproar. Their panties are all in a bunch right now. And they are all afraid of Michael Pack because they're afraid he will turn things into a Trump propaganda machine. And of course, this is only coming from those that have done mostly false news and are sitting heavy in the deep state agendas and are associated as left-wing activists. So they are afraid that he is going to remove independent media. And this means that really they are afraid he is going to put an end to their fear-mongering, their false reporting, their hypocritical agendas, and they are really afraid not of him suppressing real news, but allowing it to come out. So think about that. Hey, thank you everybody for hanging in there with me. I know I throw a whole lot of information at you in this one, and I really hope you'll think about us and what I've said here, because we need to pay attention to these steps that I talked about in here. Okay, we need to pay attention to where we are being pitted against each other, and we need to stop playing into these agendas so that we can cut them off, we can stop them, we can get onto a world that is what we truly want, that truly has compassion based in it, and not just the fake phony representation that is being sent to us, not just the fake phony representation that is coming through and manipulated by Soros. Take care, everybody, and I will see you later.